There was a woman I once heard about, not a famous woman, not someone written about in books, just a regular woman living a regular life somewhere in a quiet suburb, with a job she didn't hate but didn't love, and a family she adored but sometimes felt invisible inside of. Every morning she would wake up before everyone else, not because she needed the quiet, but because she needed the hour. She would pad down to the kitchen in her socks, make a cup of tea, and sit at the table in the gray early light, and for about 45 minutes she would be kind. She would think about what her daughter needed that week. She would think about how to help her husband through his work stress. She would think about her mother, aging now, getting forgetful, needing more patience. She would think about the friend going through the divorce, the neighbor whose dog had died, the colleague who seemed off lately. She would sit there quietly tending to the emotional landscape of everyone in her life, and then she would pour a second cup of tea, stand at the sink, and look out at the backyard and feel the strangest, most hollow thing. Nothing. Not tired, not sad, not angry, just gone. Like there was no one home behind her own eyes. She mentioned this once to her sister, and her sister said, perfectly cheerfully, "Oh, that's just what it's like to be a good person. You give everything away. That's love." And the woman nodded and smiled and believed her and went on giving everything away, until one morning she sat down at the table, picked up her tea, and had the most terrifying thought she had ever had in her life. She thought, "I wish I didn't exist anymore." Not that she wanted to die, not exactly, just to disappear, to not be needed, to not be responsible for holding everything together, to simply not be here. And the thought scared her so badly that she put her tea down and didn't drink it. And she told no one. If you have ever had a thought like that, even a whisper of it, even in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not dangerous. You are not weak. You are simply someone who has been giving and giving and giving, and has never once turned that river of kindness back toward yourself. And today, gently, without any pressure at all, I want to talk about that, because I think most of us, especially the kind ones, especially the ones who show up for everyone else, have a very deep and very old wound around this. We have learned somewhere along the way that our worth is in our usefulness, that love is something we earn by being good enough, helpful enough, selfless enough, that softness is something we are allowed to offer to others, but not to ourselves. And we have become, without meaning to, our own harshest critic, our own most demanding boss, the one person in our lives who never ever cuts us any slack. Pema Chödrön, this remarkable woman, this Buddhist teacher who has walked into the darkest corners of human suffering with a flashlight and a gentle laugh, she talks about something she calls Maitri. It's a Sanskrit word, and it means loving kindness, unconditional friendliness toward yourself, not self-improvement, not self-optimization, not trying to be a better person, just friendliness, like the friendliness you'd offer to a tired stranger on a park bench, warmth with no strings attached. And when she first started teaching this, she said people would look at her like she'd suggested something vaguely illegal. Because for so many of us, being kind to ourselves feels like cheating, like making an excuse, like giving up. We think if I'm soft with myself, I'll fall apart. If I stop pushing, I'll stop functioning. If I forgive myself, I'll repeat my mistakes. So we keep the inner critic running, like a smoke alarm that never turns off even when there's no fire, just beeping constantly, a low, steady hum of not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And we become so used to it that we stop hearing it as a sound. We start hearing it as the truth. Here's what Pema says about that, and I want you to really let this land. She says the most fundamental aggression toward ourselves, the most basic act of self-betrayal, is not laziness. It's not selfishness. It's not failing to meet our goals. It's the simple daily habit of abandoning ourselves in our own moment of suffering. Think about that. When your friend calls you at 2 in the morning, crying, you don't say, well, to be honest, you kind of brought this on yourself. Have you thought about what you could have done differently? Because I've noticed a pattern here, and frankly, I'm a little disappointed in your choices. You don't say that. You say, I'm here, tell me everything. I've got you. But when you are the one crying at 2 in the morning, even just on the inside, even in that quiet, muffled way that no one can see, what do you say to yourself? Be honest. Most of us say something much closer to the first thing. We diagnose ourselves, we criticize ourselves, we list our own failures like evidence in a trial where we are both the defendant and the prosecutor. And then we wonder why we feel so alone. You are alone in that moment because you have left yourself. You walked out on yourself at the exact moment you needed someone to stay. This is the wound Pema is pointing to, not the hard things that happen to us, not the grief or the loss or the fear. Those are weather, they pass. The wound is the habit of turning against ourselves when the weather gets hard. And here's the thing about habits, and this is where it gets interesting, I promise. Habits can be unlearned. New ones can be grown, not through willpower, not through discipline, but through something much simpler and much more radical, through repetition of a different choice. She tells this story sometimes about a student who came to her deeply ashamed of her own anger. This woman had worked on herself for years. She meditated. She went to therapy. She read every book. And still, when something triggered her, the rage would come up so fast and so hot that she scared herself. She said to Pema, I'm so disappointed in myself. I thought I was further along than this. And Pema looked at her, and you can imagine that look, that warm, slightly amused, completely unimpressed look she has. And she said, sweetheart, the anger isn't the problem. The shame about the anger is the problem. You are fighting a war with yourself and you are losing, and you think the solution is to fight harder. But what if the solution is to stop fighting? The woman was quiet. What if, Pema continued, instead of calling yourself a failure every time the anger comes up, you just got curious? What if you said, oh, hello, there you are again. I wonder what you need. The woman said, that sounds like giving up. And Pema said, no, that sounds like growing up. There's a teaching she comes back to again and again, and it's so simple it sounds almost silly until you actually try it, and then it stops being silly very fast. She says, you are the sky, everything else is weather. Sit with that for a moment. You are not the storm. You are not the thunder. You are not the gray clouds or the freezing rain or the weeks of flatness and fog. You are the sky that holds all of it. And the sky, and this is the part that matters, the sky does not fight the weather. It does not clench around the rain and try to squeeze it out faster. It does not apologize for the clouds. It does not make plans to be sunnier tomorrow. It just holds everything with this enormous, quiet, patient spaciousness, and every single storm passes, not because the sky defeated it, but because the sky was spacious enough to let it move through. This is what self-compassion actually is. Not making excuses, not lowering your standards, not giving yourself permission to be unkind or lazy or harmful. It is simply being spacious enough to let your own suffering move through you without turning it into a war. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I've thought it too. You're thinking, this sounds beautiful in theory, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I'm carrying. You don't know the ways I've failed, the people I love, the things I said that I can't take back, the choices I made in the dark that I'm still ashamed of. And you're right. I don't know, but I'll tell you what I do know. I know that the part of you that holds all of that shame so tightly, that refuses to let yourself off the hook, that keeps the inner court in session year after year after year, that part of you loves deeply. It has very high standards because it cares enormously. It is trying in its clumsy and painful way to make sure you become who you want to be. It is not your enemy. It just needs a gentler approach. Because here's what the research tells us, and the contemplatives have known this for thousands of years, long before the researchers caught up. Self-criticism does not produce growth. It produces paralysis. It produces shame. And shame in the body feels exactly like being caught in quicksand. The more you struggle against it, the deeper you sink. What produces growth is this: being witnessed with compassion, being held without judgment, being told even by yourself, you are not too much, you are not too broken, you don't have to earn your way back to yourself. You are already there. You just have to stop leaving. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. Not as a big dramatic spiritual overhaul, not as a daily practice that requires 45 minutes in a meditation cushion. Just small moments, tiny pivots, the gentlest possible beginning. The first thing is this: when you notice the inner critic doing its work, and you will notice because it is always doing its work, try not to fight it. Try not to shame yourself for being self-critical. That is just shame about shame, and it gets exhausting quickly. Instead, do the thing Pema calls the pause. Just a breath, just one, and notice, oh, there it is, there's that voice again. It's saying the usual things. Hello, voice. That's it. That's the whole practice at first. Just noticing, just a tiny moment of spaciousness between you and the narration. You are not the voice. You are the one who hears it. And that is a profound difference. The second thing is what she calls the tender question. When you are suffering, when you are exhausted, or ashamed, or overwhelmed, or numb, instead of immediately trying to fix it or analyze it or push through it, you ask yourself one small question. What would feel kind right now? Not productive, not impressive, not what should I do next, not how do I solve this. Just what would feel kind? Maybe it's a glass of water, maybe it's stepping outside for 3 minutes, maybe it's canceling the thing you dread, maybe it's calling the person you miss, maybe it's just sitting quietly for a moment and letting yourself feel what you feel without narrating over it. You'd be surprised how often we already know the answer. We just haven't made it okay to listen. The third thing is what I think of as the best friend translation. The next time you say something to yourself, catch it and then translate it into what you would say to your best friend if they came to you with the exact same situation. Not a watered down version. The actual thing you would say, the warm, honest, non-judgmental thing you would say to someone you love. And then say that to yourself. This feels ridiculous the first time, I want to be honest about that. It can feel almost embarrassing, like you're performing kindness at yourself. But something interesting happens if you keep doing it. The voice starts to change, not because you forced it to, but because you kept offering it a different template. You kept saying, this is how we speak to people we love in this house. And gradually, slowly, that becomes the default. Pema has this phrase she uses, begin again. It sounds so simple, but the depth in it is enormous. She means every single moment is a chance to start over, not a big dramatic starting over, not a New Year's resolution starting over. Just this breath, this moment, this tiny choice to be a little softer, a little more patient, a little more on your own side. You don't have to have been kind to yourself yesterday. You don't have to have a streak going. You don't have to have earned it. You just begin again, right now, in this moment, with whatever you've got. And the fourth practice, and this is the one I want to leave you with because I think it's the most quietly revolutionary, is what Pema calls the touch and go. When an emotion comes up, grief, fear, anger, loneliness, that strange, hollow feeling of wishing you could disappear, instead of grabbing it and turning it over and analyzing every angle, just touch it, like you touch the surface of water, lightly, with curiosity. Oh, there's something here. What is this? Not, what's wrong with me that I feel this way? Just, what is this? And then let it go. not because you're dismissing it, but because you trust that if it needs to come back, it will, and you'll be here when it does. You don't have to solve every feeling. You don't have to understand every shadow. You just have to be willing to acknowledge that it's there and then keep breathing. I want to come back for a moment to that woman in the kitchen, because the story doesn't end the way it seemed like it was going to. She didn't spiral. She didn't break down. She didn't vanish. What she did was much smaller than that and much larger. She picked up her tea, cold by now, and she looked at it, and she thought, when did I last do something just because I wanted to? Not for the kids, not for the household, not for anyone, just for me. And she couldn't remember. So she did something tiny. She poured out the cold tea, made a new cup, sat back down at the table, and instead of thinking about everyone else's needs, she just sat there. She didn't meditate. She didn't journal. She didn't call anyone. She just sat there in the gray light with her warm cup and let herself be a person for 45 minutes instead of a function. And she told me, well, she didn't tell me, because this is a story, and you know that, and I know that, and we're both okay with it. But if she had told me, I think she would have said, it felt strange. It felt guilty. It felt like playing hooky from my own life. And then, around the 42nd minute, it felt like breathing, just being here, just being the sky. This is what self-compassion gives you. Not perfection, not ease, not the absence of hard feelings. It gives you the ability to be present in your own life, to be someone who is actually home when life comes knocking. Because the truth is, and this is the part Pema returns to, over and over in her gentle and slightly mischievous way, you cannot pour from an empty vessel. You have heard this, but I want to offer you the deeper version of it. It is not just that you'll run out of energy if you don't take care of yourself. It's that without compassion for yourself, you cannot actually offer genuine compassion to anyone else. What you're offering instead is performance. It is giving from fear, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of not being needed, fear of what you might have to face if you stopped being so useful. Real love, the kind that actually reaches people, the kind that comes from fullness, from someone who has first been willing to be kind to themselves, to sit with their own suffering, to say to themselves, I am worth tending to. That kind of person, they change rooms when they walk into them. Not because they're impressive, but because they're real. They're actually there. And you can be that person, you already are that person, in the moments when you forget to judge yourself for long enough to just show up. Pema says the spiritual journey is not about becoming someone better. It's about becoming more deeply, honestly, compassionately who you already are. You are already enough. I know you don't fully believe that. I know there are days when it feels like a fortune cookie platitude. But I'm saying it again anyway, because the things we most need to hear are usually the things we've heard so many times they've stopped landing, and sometimes all it takes is hearing it at the right moment, in the right quiet, at the right temperature of morning. You are enough, not when you've fixed everything, not when you've earned it, not when you've proven it to everyone who ever doubted you. Right now, in this moment, with all of it, the mess, the grief, the exhaustion, the ways you've fallen short, the ways you've hurt people, the ways you've hurt yourself. You are enough to deserve kindness. And the first person who needs to know that is you. So begin again, not tomorrow, not after the hard thing is over, not when things settle down, right now. With one breath, with one small act of gentleness toward yourself. And if you forget, and you will forget because we all do, begin again and again and again. That's the practice. That's the whole practice. Coming back to yourself over and over with a little more warmth each time. The sky doesn't stop being the sky because a storm passed through it. And you don't stop being worthy of love because you've had some storms. You are still here. And that, quietly, is everything. If something in this video touched something in you, maybe a quiet recognition, maybe something that's been sitting in your chest for a long time, I would gently invite you to share it with someone, not because you need to explain yourself, just because connection is part of the medicine. And if you want to keep walking this path together in this gentle, unhurried way, you know where to find us. We'll be here with tea and open hands and all the time in the world. And while I have you here just for another moment, I want to say one more thing, because I think there's a part of this conversation we often skip over too quickly. We talk about self-compassion as a practice, as something to do, and then the moment the video ends or the book closes, we go right back to the old groove, back to the familiar low hum of not enough. So I want to talk about why that happens, not to make you feel worse about it, but because understanding the mechanism is part of how you gently dismantle it. Most of us who struggle to be kind to ourselves, learned very early that our inner world was not safe to inhabit fully. Maybe you grew up in a home where showing need was seen as weakness. Maybe you were the child who held things together, who made yourself small so others could be large. Maybe you received the message, not in words but in atmosphere, that love was conditional, that you had to earn your place in the room. And so you built a very sensible strategy. You became excellent at taking care of others. You became fluent in everyone else's emotional language. You got very, very good at reading the room and adjusting yourself accordingly. And you stopped asking too much of the room in return. It worked. For a while it worked beautifully. But here's the thing about strategies we build in childhood. They don't update automatically. They don't look at the calendar and say, oh, you're 34 now, and you're safe, and the people around you are different, and you don't have to earn your place anymore. They just keep running, like software written for a computer that no longer exists, still trying to execute its original instructions. And so the adult you, the one with the job and the friendships and the meditation app and the genuine desire to grow, keeps showing up in situations and reaching for the old toolkit, keeps soothing everyone else first, keeps making themselves invisible, keeps apologizing for taking up space, not because you're broken, not because you failed at healing, but because the nervous system is deeply conservative. It doesn't change for good intentions, it changes for repeated experience. And what that means, practically gently, is that you have to give your nervous system repeated experiences of being kind to yourself, not dramatic ones, small ones, tiny, consistent, boring ones. The kind that stack up slowly like sediment until one day you realize the landscape has quietly shifted. This is not fast work. I want to be honest with you about that. Pema herself has said, and she says it with that wonderful laugh of hers, that she has been meditating for decades and she is still regularly a work in progress, still catching herself in the old patterns, still beginning again. But she says something beautiful about that. She says, the fact that I catch it now, that's the difference. I still fall, but I notice faster, and I'm gentler when I get up. That's the goal. Not perfection, not the absence of the old patterns, just noticing faster and being gentler when you get up. There's a phrase she uses that I keep coming back to. She talks about the genuine heart of sadness. And at first that might not sound like something you'd want to cultivate. Sadness doesn't have the best marketing. But what she means by it is something quite different from what we usually mean by sadness. She means a kind of openness, a tenderness, a willingness to be moved by the world, by your own life, by the simple, unbearable, beautiful fact of being a feeling creature in a complicated world. She says that when we let ourselves touch that genuine heart of sadness, not wallow in it, not perform it, just touch it honestly, something very interesting happens. We stop being armored. And when we stop being armored, we become available to ourselves, to the people we love, to the moment as it actually is, rather than the version we're frantically managing. She calls this the genuine heart of warriorship, which sounds very dramatic and not at all like what we've been talking about. But what she means by warrior is not someone who fights. It's someone who is brave enough to feel, someone who doesn't run from the tenderness of life. And that takes more courage than almost anything else I can think of. More courage than ambition, more courage than achievement. Because ambition and achievement still give you something to hide behind. Feeling your own life, clearly and honestly, with gentleness, that has nowhere to hide. That is the bravest thing. And if you're watching this video, if you've stayed this long, if this particular title called you in, I suspect you have more of that courage than you give yourself credit for. Because the people who most need to hear that self-compassion is possible are often the people who are most allergic to claiming it for themselves, the ones who will nod along for others and quietly exempt themselves. The ones who will share this video with a friend who needs it without for a second thinking, wait, this is for me too. So let me say it directly. This is for you, not for the friend, not for the partner, or the parent, or the colleague. This is for the tired, sincere, slightly armored person watching this right now, in whatever room they're in, at whatever hour of the day or night or 3 a.m. that brought them here. You deserve the same quality of presence you offer everyone else. Not as a reward, not because you've earned it, because you are a living being, and living beings are worthy of care simply by virtue of being alive and feeling. That's the whole argument. It really is that simple. Though I know it doesn't feel simple, I know it feels like there are 1,000 reasons it doesn't apply to you specifically. I've heard them all. I've thought most of them myself. But here's what I want to leave you with. Pema talks about something called the practice of not giving up on yourself. And she's very clear that this is not the same as thinking highly of yourself, or believing everything you do is great, or bypassing the genuine work of looking at your patterns honestly. It just means you keep showing up for yourself, even when it's awkward, even when the inner critic is loud, even when the old voice says, you don't deserve this, you haven't done enough, wait until you've fixed the obvious problems and then maybe. You show up anyway. You keep choosing, moment by moment, to be on your own side, not in a defensive way, not in a way that makes you closed, but in the way that a good parent is on their child's side, honestly, warmly, with clear eyes and an open heart. You are allowed to be that for yourself, not someday. Now, begin again. And again, the sky is still there, behind every cloud. It has never left. It will never leave. You are already home. You just need to stop evicting yourself. I'll see you here anytime you need to come back and hear it again. Take good care of yourself, not as a favor to anyone else, just because you're worth it, just because you're here, and being here is enough.